Well, hello, everybody. Are you excited to learn about everything that's going on in the state of California in terms of politics? Good, good. Then we will make up answers to make it seem like we're qualified to do exactly that. Now, we do have some people that actually are qualified up here. I am Zach Friend. I'm not one of those people, but I have three other people up here that will be able to help. We've got Ian Calderon. Ian's the former majority leader in the assembly, but also has been remarkably actively involved in California state politics for quite some time, including currently. We've got Paul Mitchell, who, by the way, is, I would say, the reason, at least part of the reason why Ian and I were ever elected to office, because he's the state data guru, and all of us have used his services for political data, but he is also the person responsible for, he was the one hired to do the Prop 50 redistricting maps. So he is intimately familiar with what's going on with Prop 50, the maps and what they mean. And so we wanted to make sure that he could give you the latest insights on things, on everything going on in Prop 50. And then Elisa Benson, my former coworker at the county of Santa Cruz, who's the Assistant County Administrative Officer, who has been the leading face for the county and this region on what the impacts of the state budget actually mean. One of the points that Matt was just bringing up is, how do you bring it home? Well, the work that's going on in the county unquestionably, and the impacts that are happening at the state level, Elisa will be able to talk about. We're going to kick it off, though, by talking about Prop 50, which I think would be something that most people are interested in. Paul, I'll ask you a very easy question, but you're a data person, so I know you aren't going to give me an easy answer. Is it going to pass?
Right now, the polling suggests that it's going to pass. I mean, the way that the polling has looked on this ballot measure the entire time, and I can get into kind of how the polling has changed, but in the last month or so, the polling has shown that about 87% of Democrats are voting for it. About 95% of Republicans are voting against it, and independents are about split. And so if you take the voter file and you do the math, that means passage. It's similar to the recall election. It looks like it's very much Team Red versus Team Blue. So the short answer is yes, it looks like it's going to pass.
And what impacts do you think, for you, Leader Calderon, what impacts do you think this will actually mean across the state? Both at the state level, I recognize these are for federal seats, but what impacts do you think that would mean? If you were back in the assembly right now, you were back in leadership in the state, what would you be prepping for as a result of this?
Well, I mean, is this on? Okay. I think there's a couple of different ways to look at this in terms of what the impact would be and how the legislature is going to look at it. I think that this is a moment in time, and there's a lot of energy and a lot of effort that's going into this effort right now. A lot of members are right now back in their districts, doing events, trying to speak to their communities, get the voters to show up and vote. In terms of future impacts, it's going to depend on ultimately the makeup of is there a chance for Democrats to actually take the House, and how you perceive your ability or the Democrats' ability to take the House in the next midterm elections, and how that's going to impact the budgeting. We're going to face 2 consecutive years of $10+ billion deficits, and that's according to the LAO. And so what the legislature is really going to have to be charged with doing is, say you're successful and we were able to win these seats, and get this, we get these seats and we can win all of these seats, and we offset, say, Texas, and Texas, again, for argument's sake, they win all of theirs. Well, how many other states are going to be redistricting? What's that makeup, and what's that difference? What's that hole going to be in terms of seats that Democrats need to pick up now in other states in order to have a shot at taking the House? So I think the politics are going to circle around, realistically, how many states have redistricted? What are the Democrats' chances of actually being able to take the House, and how is that going to factor in understanding now that we're going to see a $10+ billion deficit this next cycle, and be able to pay for and take care of and prepare for probably the worst. You prepare for the worst, but there's two different tracks you're going to have to be preparing for, and I think that's going to be the challenge of the beginning of this next legislature and that budget process.
Lisa, I'm going to bring you in a second. I'm going to ask a follow-up for Paul here, because I think that it's rare that we'd have access to the person who literally drew the maps and what your thought process was. So walk us through behind the scenes, what that was like, what you were thinking, what you were hired to do, and what this could realistically mean for the state, just in a pure political makeup sense.
So first off, I knew I was going to be coming here, so I made sure I touched none of your districts. So all the districts here are the same. Nothing's changed. No apple. Don't throw any tomatoes at me. The reality is that I was brought in to draw these maps, coming not from a partisan redistricting background. I've never done a partisan redistricting in my life, but I've done over 100 local, county redistrictings. I did the New York State Independent Redistricting Commission redistricting. I've worked in like 14 states. If you want to talk about redistricting in Alaska, I drew the legislative districts in Alaska. So like it's all been nonpartisan, local government, regular kind of white hat redistricting. Coming in and doing something to try to push back on Texas was totally new for me. But just like anybody else who's an expert in their field, they understand how everything works in that industry. And so I understood how to draw lines to push back on what Texas is doing. But the approach we took was different than the approach they're taking in these other states. We did not do a pedal to the metal, crazy gerrymander in order to try to create the 5 pickups necessary to push back on Texas. We drew a map where 80% of the voters in the state are voting in the same districts. We drew a map where we protected communities of interest. We drew a map where UCLA came out with a study saying that the map is better for Asian American political power. We did a map that PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California, said is a status quo map, and that if anything, it slightly increases voting power for Latinos. We did a map that reduced the numbers of cities that got split. So really the approach that we took was so vastly different than these other states, where in Texas they split 145 cities and drew districts that go 30 miles down a freeway to connect 2 areas. These kind of like gross gerrymanders you see around the country, that's not what we have here. And in part, the reason it's not the way we have that here is because all of you were going to be in a position to have to vote on these maps. And if what you were hearing from community organizations and from advocates was that this map was so vehemently horrible, like the Texas map, it would erode voter support. The fact that the maps are kind of vanilla in terms of the maps are somewhat equivalent to the existing commission maps, the fact that commissioners have come out and support these maps is the environment, what we were trying to create when we created these maps. We weren't trying to pick up 7 or 9 or make every seat a Democratic seat like some people were proposing.
Elisa, let me bring you in on this without actually bringing you into the politics so that you still have a job tomorrow. Seem reasonable? At the end of the day, the politics of this behind the scenes impacts the realistic policy that you're living in. And I saw that you recently gave a presentation to the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors talking about this dismantling of the safety net. So walk through, as we're sitting here in the political realm and the data realm, in a theoretical space about what this vote could do, say a Prop 50, but walk us through what you're experiencing right now and what your biggest fear is, in particular on a state budget side for a county in this region in 6 to 12 months.
Thanks, Zach. And yes, one of these things is not like the others. I, as an assistant county executive officer, part of our role is to be, while politically sensitive and aware, really trying to stay in that neutral space because we need to work with all kinds of partners. And so we try and really come to this work from an implementation and a pragmatism perspective. As Zach mentioned, we did a pretty comprehensive briefing of our supervisors, about 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, on really focusing on the impacts of HR 1 on our safety net services. And I think one of the things I described it as, and obviously every community is facing this, I described it as the, phased deconstruction of our safety net and healthcare system. Unfortunately, I had to step out when Dr. Radner was speaking, but I think he spoke to a lot of that today. And what's really, one of the ways we've been describing it, it's like an earthquake happened on the other side of the world, and we're seeing a tsunami come towards us, because there was a lot of intentionality of phasing in this breakdown of our CalFresh, of our food, our food security programs, of our Medicaid, Medi-Cal HERE programs in multiple ways, whether it's who's eligible, the costs of that, and just the complexity of administering it. So all of those pieces are coming at us, honestly, in sort of a way where we can see them and start to sort our way through them and understand the local impacts. Just as an example, where we're seeing it first is in food security, in our CalFresh program, where folks are losing eligibility, an expectation of folks who were not going to be subject to work requirements that is now being waived, or that waiver is now being eliminated, and we will need to ramp up our capacity to work with folks who are on those programs to see if they actually have any work that can meet that standard so they can continue to get their benefits. So it's really having us have to stop, reassess, and retool what we're doing to maintain as best we can services, basic services for the most vulnerable in our community. So, and that's just, I would say, sort of what the larger scale picture is. And within the probably 30-line schedule that we have, trying to break down each piece of dismantling, there are a few state budget impacts in there as well. One that comes to mind is, and again, it's phased, is we will be having folks who have, what do we call it? Unsatisfactory immigration status, their eligibility for getting Medi-Cal in the state, that system is going to be closed to them come January. So we will have a group of folks that have no insurance pathway to health care. We have that same group of folks who are within the Medicaid system, the Medi-Cal system, will be subject to monthly premiums. Thankfully, and this is a state budget issue, not a federal budget issue. The original proposal was for these folks who, I just want to remind everyone, if you're on Medi-Cal, as a family, I think a family of four can have income of no more than $40,000 a year. An individual, it's $16,000 a year. So we're talking about very low-income people, that those folks, if they are undocumented, would be subject to $30 monthly copays. The original proposal was $100 per month. So when, again, for many of the people in this room, that seems very reasonable. But for the population we're talking about, this is significant aspects of their income. So I'll just, those are some of the immediate things. I would say the larger issue for our region, for counties in California right now, that's still a state budget issue, is we still don't have resolution on how we can have ongoing continuous, consistent funding to address homelessness. That is a gaping hole in the budget, in the state budget, and while for all the progress communities have been making, that is still one of probably the largest impacts of the state budget on what we do locally in terms of addressing one of our really persistent chronic issues.
Ian, let me bring you in on this. So there were a whole host of issues that are impacting now local governments. And I think some of them are pretty clear and talked about, but you ran the floor for multiple years. You're intimately connected into the state legislature in a way that nobody else in this room is. What do you see now, looking at 2026, would be one or two issues that really aren't being talked about that you think will actually become pretty real issues facing the state? If you were to be looking around the corner and talking about something in advance on the leading or bleeding edge, what do you think that this room of education leaders, nonprofit CEOs, business leaders, government leaders should be thinking about that maybe isn't currently on their radar?
I mean, if I'm giving you my honest advice, I think you have to start to get very creative in how you start talking to the legislature, understanding the challenges that are going to be facing the state budget over the next couple of budget cycles. There's only so much money. You've got the threat of losing federal dollars from the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress. And so the access to capital and revenue is shrinking and closing. And so what you have to do is think very carefully and be very honest with yourselves about what the priorities are and how you're going to talk to the legislature and the administration about those priorities so that you could experience the least amount of impact as possible. Because that is going to be, I think, the greatest challenge that's going to face the legislature in 2026 and beyond, is the fact that, we've been able to be operating in this somewhat recessionary type budgetary cycles, but it's going to grow and it's going to become more impactful, and they're only going to have so many resources to stave off the challenges that are going to present itself. And finding ways at the same time, when you're looking at the electorate and what the electorate is interested in and what they're begging for the government, the state government, to put more money in their pockets, to make home ownership an actual reality again for generations that now believe that the state is telling them that it's no longer an opportunity for you to own a home one day, to pull yourself out of your indentured servitude of renting a home because corporate interests are going to spend money to build an apartment complex, and you're now their income. And so they don't want you to get out of a rental property and become a homeowner and have a path to home ownership, because you're an infinite revenue source for them. But if you got to find $4,000 to put down for first and last month's rent, when most Americans can't afford a surprise $400 bill, and you're paying 50+% more, 50+% of your monthly income on your rent, it's crushing. And people feel the vice just around them every single day. And the legislature has been making really good strides in trying to address these challenges. But their job in being able to solve for these challenges, to put more money in people's pockets, to solve for the things that are going to make everyday life a little bit more livable and a little bit easier, we're losing the ability to mitigate that. And so, that's why I've expressed my support for Proposition 50 in terms of being able to, the only way you're going to be able to guarantee federal dollars continue to come to the state of California is by having some kind of leverage. And the only way you're going to get leverage with this administration and congressional Republicans is by having a House. You got to have the House. But beyond that, there are just a lot of bleak realities that we're going to have to face. And 2026 is going to be a very impactful, pivotal year that's going to very much inform what the next 3+ years are going to look like in the state of California.
Paul, what do you see in the data? I mean, are there things in the polling data that you feel are not really being discussed on a legislative side, or that you don't think are really being advocated with this group here, that are starting to bubble up? Maybe it's smaller numbers, but you're seeing growth in it, that you think may become a trend or even a political policy of interest in 12 to 24 months?
Well, there's a lot of policy interest for voters kind of shift as things change in our culture, as things change in the news. And I've done some polling over time. Like, as an example, I started polling on whether people would trust self-driving cars like 8 years ago, and how that's changed over time, and how things like that get polarized in weird ways. Because at one point, Democrats were like, yeah, self-driving cars, that's gonna be awesome. And then how did they start identifying self-driving cars when Elon became the big thing? And then Elon went all Trump, and now all of a sudden Democrats, we're against self-driving cars now. And the way that our politics is now is very driven by this hyper-partisanship. And it's not just partisanship, it's reverse partisanship. It's not, we're Team Blue, we're Democrats, and so we believe in self-driving cars because that's our value. It could be environmentally good, it could reduce deaths and all that kind of stuff. We're Team Blue, so we're against whatever Team Red is doing. And if now Team Red is the self-driving car team, then we're against that. This culture that we have, and it infects a lot of our politics, and it honestly affects kind of policy priorities for this legislature, because so much of what can be done ends up being thrown into these kind of hyper-partisan buckets. And so that's a challenge for lawmakers or people seeking office to try to talk about the issues in front of us. And some of the issues in front of us are really gaping huge issues. Aside from what Ian was talking about with the budget, things just like AI and technology, the way things potentially could be changing in our workforces, the way things are changing in our personal lives, the way the world is changing for our kids. Those are big, huge issues. And a lot of those challenges are the things that I would hope that in the next 6 months or 6 years, the legislature, the governor, the state government here in California could take a lead on, not just for our kids and us in the room, but also for the country. And in a way, like if California can take a lead on some of these issues, they can take a lead on these issues for the entire world. And I think the challenge is getting there in this environment where we see everything within this kind of hyper-partisan lens.
I mean, I couldn't agree. I think we're living exactly what you're seeing in the polling data. Recognizing that we have a little less than 10 minutes left, so we'll be a little bit quick on these answers. Elisa, what are you finding just from a lobbying perspective? I mean, I know that it's called advocacy at the local government level, but from a lobbying perspective, what brick walls are you hitting when you're trying to get state or federal interests? And I ask that because then I'm going to ask Ian to give us advice on the best way to actually, for this room, to effectively advocate or lobby for folks. But what are you seeing when you're trying to get additional funding right now? Or because I mean, one of the things that Ian had said is that we have to get creative. And so I'm going to ask him what that actually means, because that sounded like a poll-tested answer. So I'm going to push him on that. So I need for you to say then, tell me about some of the creative ways that you've tried and failed in 60 seconds or so, and then we're going to put Ian back on the spot.
We were friends.
Well, I'm happy to answer that, Zach, but I actually do want to talk a little bit about that. What do I see as the issue coming up in the spring that really, I think will require the attention of everyone. What's interesting to me in some of the quiet conversations, that we have about what's going on from a county implementation of state programs, that's a lot of what we do, is instead of asking for more, the counsel I've received from our very, very talented state legislative delegation is, tell us what you have to protect. Like, what do we fight for? Because there ain't no more money. So you need to let us know what is the most important things you want to protect. So I would just say that. And so that's where we're going. We're like, oh, okay. This isn't about we don't have enough to do this other thing you wanted, but what are the most critical services you have to protect? But I do want to speak to this broader question of, what the next 12 to 18 months. I would have loved be having a statewide, deep collaborative conversation around AI, around climate. I mean, those are the shifts that we need to be focusing on understanding statewide, regionally. What does this mean across sectors? But quite frankly, we won't be able to do that because what we need to be focusing on now are these basic systems of quality of life, whether it's food or healthcare, that we thought were stable, and they are no longer stable. So, I mean, that's what I expect that is going to be a major issue in the spring, is as we have seen what Dr. Radner had talked about this morning, this is not just healthcare for our poorest, most vulnerable communities. These changes are going to rolling through the entire healthcare system. So we have to come together and figure out what does that mean for us, because we cannot rely on the federal government in the way we have in the past. And how important is access to basic healthcare, a shared value across Team Red, across Team Blue, that we all should be able to talk about. So I just would want to say that's what I see is a really critical place that we have to do better in terms of collaborating.
I think that's an outstanding point. Ian, I apologize that I lost our friendship by being honest up here for a minute. But walk us through how you then what advice would you provide to the room in particular? I mean, I see that Senator Laird's here. I know Speaker Rivas is here. Quite frankly, some of the most effective legislators in the state of California are in the room right now, and you ran the floor. What advice would you provide in this hyper-polarized environment, in this budget climate, to effectively advocate?
I mean, the state has a lot of obligations, a lot of financial obligations, and the dynamic between the legislature and the governor is that the legislature believes, no, we can do it, we can find a way, we can find a path, and the governor ultimately comes down and says, no, we can't do this and we can't do that. But what you're seeing, I think, just with the legislature in general and politics, state politics in general, is just a realization of the situation that we're in. I mean, even just with the healthcare fight right now and the government shutdown, I mean, you're looking at, if these tax credits aren't extended, you're looking at, $500 a month, potentially moving to $2,000 a month in healthcare costs. I mean, think about the cost and impact on that, and a state budget unwilling or unable to withstand and bring that in. And the creativity, I get that that's a generalized term, but I think it goes back to what Elisa's saying in terms of, well, this is our need. Like, we have to protect this. We cannot lose this. We cannot sacrifice this. You have to figure out exactly what that is. And any ways that you can work with the legislature to maximize whatever that is, creatively finding a way to generate maybe some revenue that isn't just state dollars, or creating some type of a program funding, green investment, or how can you just find pockets of money and pockets of dollars that are already on the table and use that to maximize it. Maybe there's some type of an investment, you'd have to figure out what that would be, but to put it in so that you can grow that money over time, even just for yourself, and have a little more certainty on having access to more of those resources, because it's just, the legislature's job is going to become really difficult. It already is difficult, and it's going to only get more difficult and continue to compound. So, they're going to have to tell you no, when at a time they don't want to tell you no. They want to say, we can figure it out, but it's going to be your job to help us, or help the legislature figure out what those solutions are and what those needs are, because you may know a lot about, your one issue. You know everything about your one issue. Well, it's the job of the legislature and the administration to know something about everything, and to have to be able to solve for everyone's needs and everyone's challenges. And so when you're crafting what your needs are, and you're crafting how you're going to approach the legislature, you have to keep that in the back of your mind, and have that guide exactly how you're going to approach them, and how you're going to message to them on what it is that your needs are, and how you feel like you can be creative with the existing dollars that you're getting, understanding that there's a high likelihood that a lot of people are going to see cuts, and it could be you.
And you were very effective at it, by the way. I mean, Ian and I actually served on a statewide commission, and I watched him completely guide a process through the state that ended up bringing in a few hundred additional $1 million to what the program that we were working on at the time that has set a national model on it. So I know that creativity also goes both ways, not just from those in the room, but from the legislature, and I applaud you on that. We have a little less than 3 minutes left, so we're going to do 3 minutes of hope, which if it had been 10 minutes, I would have said 10 minutes of hope, but it's the modern times, so we got 3 minutes of hope here. So and now it's actually down to 2 something. So we got 2 minutes of something of hope, and this thing's literally like my life, the clock is clicking down right in front of me. So Ian, I'm gonna go just straight down here. Give me, say, 60 seconds or so of how you see the hope for the greatest state in the country, the greatest state in the world, the state of California, and this region that I believe actually drives so much in the innovation and thought leadership across this state. Give me 60 seconds of your thoughts of hope.
I mean, we are the greatest state in this nation, and we are the 4th largest economy in the world. And we can't just talk about that. We have the resources to actually do something about that. We have the resources at the state level to think about, how do we just DC-proof California so that we're not constantly at whatever their whims are and whatever their political interests are at that time. We can take care of ourselves, and anything we get from them, it's gravy. But my hope is also, it's in us, it's in our people, and it's in our resolve. I have 4 little kids. 2 girls, 2 boys. My girls are the oldest, boys are the youngest, 8, 6, 5, and 4. And there isn't anything that I wouldn't do to make sure that they have a future in this state. There isn't anything that I wouldn't do to make sure that they're getting the education that they need, that they have the health care that they need, that they have a chance for home ownership one day, and that they can actually just stay here and just feel like they have a future here. So the hope is that we have resolve, we have resources, and we have people that are so dedicated and so committed to figuring this out. That's where the hope is. It's in us.
Paul, the data is depressing. A minute of hope.
I'll keep it simple. I mean, I agree with Ian. I think I have hope that California can be a leader. What you were saying about healthcare is so important, and access and helping. My wife is the CEO of Planned Parenthood, and they've been completely defunded around the country. And my hope is that the state will be able to come in as California and express the values and make sure that those clinics stay open, make sure that care is still provided. And I believe we can do that. I think California I've always been like a big believer in California, that it can, really lead in a progressive way. And I don't just mean that in a partisan way, but in a looking towards the future way. It can lead the country and it can lead the world. And so I'm proud of being a Californian still. It's just, I know we have a lot of challenges in front of us, and I'm very hopeful.
Well, I just look around this room, and that's what actually gives me hope. One of my lanes is in emergency response and emergency management, and whether it was during COVID, whether it was during the CZU fires, whether it was during the 2023 flooding in Pajaro, this community came together across sectors to support each other. And I think we need to do that again. And we need to have more opportunities to look at data together, to roll up our sleeves and say, what can I bring to this conversation that I'm not bringing right now? And really punch through the silos and our culture of, we've never done it that way. We really have to be creative and have local agency to solve problems for our community, for our families, for our workforce, and just have different conversations and recognize we have to do this together. Government can't do it alone. Our not-for-profit partners are already doing a ton. We have to welcome business to the table and really try and problem solve together.
Elisa, Paul, and Ian, the region and the state are better off because you are all actively involved in it. Please join me in thanking them for this panel.